Hello everyone, I am Zahir Al and today I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors Nada Amir and Dr. Adnan Yahya, our paper under the title Detecting Inconsistencies in Narrative Elements of Cross-Lingual Nakba Texts. So
Can you
let me
speak
go.
louder, Zahia?
Oh, yes.
Please.
So let's first start with an outline. First, I'm going to introduce our paper and the background topics behind it, and then we'll go through the system architecture and the implementation flow, and lastly, we'll go through the limitations and any future work that can be done to our. So, okay, let me first introduce you to our work. What we did was a proof of concept that proposes a methodology of detecting contradictions in historical texts about the Nakba, which focuses on identifying biases, contradictions, and any missing narratives. And the outline or the pipeline that we propose suggests a combination of translation, fact extraction using summarization, and natural language inputs. Okay. So in this section, I just wanted to explain briefly some of the concepts that we used in this work, and namely, they are translation and summarization. For summarization, there are mainly two types, extractive and abstractive summaries, and the difference between them is that in extractive summaries, the summary is composed of original sentences of the main text without change, while in abstractive summaries, the sentences are paraphrased, so it is more prone to inaccurate. Another important concept is the use of Google's Gemini for summarization and translation, because many studies suggested that Google Gemini outperformed other language models in these fields. And in a previous work of ours, we concluded that Google Gemini, when used in translation, performed better than other machine translation models. So that's why we used Google Gemini for these specific tasks. And also for summarization, we also used TextRank, which is an extractive algorithm that extracts sentences as is from text without change. And it ranks the sentences retrieved by the importance to the text. Okay, so now it is suitable to go through the system architecture. In this slide, we start with the implementation flow as it can be seen. We start with the pieces of text, the narrative texts in languages in English and Arabic specifically. And then we perform translation so that any article in English is translated to Arabic specifically. And that's because the targeted audience is Arabic speaking audience. And those translated texts now in Arabic are then passed to Google's Gemini and TextRank for summarization. And the facts extracted will be passed through contradiction to find contradictions and to find missing facts to another. Okay, so the first step is translation. Why do we use translation? As I stated before, because the main audience that we target is Arabic-speaking audience, especially historians and experts. So we wanted that this task be suitable and accessible to them. And how do we approach this translation? There's at first a language detection phase for the text so that it processes only English content. And then we can Google Gemini to translate while preserving the tone and meaning, which results in the texts in Arabic that are translated and without changing the original intended tone and meaning. So here's an example. As we can see, the context remained the same. The second step is to use summarization. And summarization here is used to extract the main points, the main key points that are actionable and represent the majority of the text. So this reduces the data complexity and reduces what we have to deal with to a smaller chunk. how do we use summarization? As, as I said before, we use two methods, the text rank method and Google Gemini. For text rank, it is an extractive algorithm, which means that the text will be extracted as is from the sentences, from the text, and it will be summarized into a list of facts and main points. And here we can see examples from the Nakba more than just a historical event, which is an article by Bassem Naim. The text we see is example of facts that were extracted by text rank. So these are the same as they can be found in the original text. Okay, the other step is using Gemini. That's the other methodology that we suggest. And it's an abstractive summarization, which means that there will be paraphrasing included. So the lists that we see on screen are similar to the ones we saw on the earlier slide, but those have some paraphrasing done to them. So to compare both summarization approaches and why we did two options for that, for text rank extracts original sentences, as said before, so it is helpful for identifying any contradictions in the text. But however, if in the case that the text contain any ambiguity, it will be passed on the list of facts that we collected. However, in Gemini, on the other hand, it does paraphrase the sentences, which means that it simplifies the complexity of some sentences. But with paraphrasing comes the risk of altering intended meaning during this paraphrasing. So to conclude, what we made as an observation is that if you want to have a summary that is quoted from the original text, it is better to use text rank. And if the sensitivity of the text is not, if the sensitivity is not of importance, we can use Gemini because it does paraphrase and reduces the complexity of the sentences. Okay, after the translation and summarization steps come the core of the project, which is the contradiction detection stage. So the core concept here is detecting contradictions by identifying conflicting informations about the same topic across texts. And how do we do that? We first identify sentences that talk about the same topic, which can be done by using similarity checks and cosine similarity. And by logic, if two sentences talk about the same topic, it is inferred that they either are neutral or contradictory. So they are either contradicting or not contradicting. So to justify our label that we will add to this, we can use NLI models to classify this relationship as one of three labels: neutral, contradiction, or entailment. And the NLI models we used are Excel and Roberta and Bot. The types of contradictions that can be found in a text is one of three types. First, there's any contradiction in the text or not. If there's a contradiction can be implicit, so it can be inferred by reading the premise and the hypothesis. And it can be an explicit contradiction, like the one in the screen, where the premise suggests the evacuation of more than 750,000 Palestinians, while the hypothesis suggests that it was not possible that almost 8,000 Palestinians were evacuated from the land. And lastly, when the case there is no contradiction, both sentences are either neutral or entailment, and so the relationship between the premise and the hypothesis cannot be labeled as a contradiction. As an insight from the results, we could tell that a contradiction was better detected by the models when the contradiction was explicit contradiction and not implicit contradictions. An example of this would be the refugee displacement denial versus acknowledgement that I just talked about. However, there are still some limitations, like in the inferred contradictions, as the model struggled with subtle contradictions or complex wording. And then occasionally happened a mislabeling of some pairs. And lastly, the last step after translation and summarization and detecting inconsistencies is finding missing facts. Why is that possible, and what do we mean, by this? We mean by finding missing facts is detecting biases by identifying facts present in one source but missing in another. This helps the reader or the expert highlight patterns in omitted information and what information tend to be omitted and in what context by which narratives. So this helps the expert be more informed about biases in history narratives. And we do this by following the following methodology. First, we embed the sentences, and then we compare the cosine similarities between the pairs of the different texts. And sentences that, when compared to sentences from the other text, score low on these similarity measures, we can say that these sentences are unique facts, as they do not have any similar sentences in the other texts. An example would be, we took examples from this article, the Nakba More Than Just a Historical Event by 2023, and the Nakba was something that did not occur, although it had to occur by Bronstein 2009. We see in the first article that Naeem mentions the current number of refugees at the time, Palestinian refugees, that they suffer deprivation of basic human rights. But this, however, was not mentioned in Bronstein's article, suggesting a potential bias, as it was not mentioned a basic result of the Nakba, which is the Palestinian refugees. However, in Bronstein focuses on the Zionist leaders' point of view back at the Nakba, which was not found in Naeem's analysis. And lastly, I'd like to finish with some limitations and future work. We noticed that for some cases, the summarization was incomplete, and this is because when paraphrasing is done by Gemini, it tends sometimes to delete some important facts or miss out on them completely, or even changing the intended meaning. And also the syntax differences between Arabic and English. This might affect some NLP tools processing. However, we'd like to remark that for some future work, as this is a proof of concept paper, as I stated before, we'd like to enhance our work and do some quantitative evaluation to assess the model's performance and to see if it's really reliable in contradiction detection and the other benefits that we mentioned. And we also believe it can be expanded to historical analysis so that it can include oral history and even articles in languages other than English, such as Hebrew, for example, as it may hold many biases for the narratives.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. Any questions you'd like
Thank
to
you,
answer?
Zahia. Any question? Are you going to continue this work, Zahia, or this is like it was a student project and then stopped?
No, hopefully we will, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Hopefully we will. There's potential for much improvements in our work as it's just a proof of concept.
Okay. So thank you very much.